that I was unfamiliar with entirely. My nephew found this. Remember, his intent originally was to go to Greek temples. In doing the reading that he and my niece did, Paestum is about 50 miles or so south of Naples, and by reputation, it's a UNESCO site as well. It has the best preserved Greek temples in the world, and it does. It was spectacular, and we just by accident, we actually did this correctly. Having done Pompeii and Herculaneum first with the guide, when we came here, this is an archaeological park. There's a wonderful museum across the street, but then the park is literally a park. There are some interpretive signs here and there, but you're just sort of wandering through this area with these spectacular ruins. But because we had done the other two tours, we actually knew what we were looking at. And of course, the guidebook is up here. I did buy the guidebook, so that was helpful as well. But this was one of my favorite places. This was spectacular. What you're looking at is the Temple of Athena. There are 3 Greek temples on this site. And the site itself was much larger than it is now. It is a park. The city was abandoned sometime, they think, around the 5th or 6th century AD, after Christianity moved into the area. It was a walled city, and parts of the wall still exist. But over the years, as things do, it filled in. Farmers were farming over it. There's a lot of private property around it. But they've saved a good portion of it. And of course, the temples would have been visible. There's a lot of artwork from the 1700s and 1800s of people who came through and painted the temples and things like that. But these temples are just spectacular. I'm not sure what that's doing there, but we'll move this. This is the Temple of Athena. This is probably the newest of the temples, dating to about the 5th century BC. They, for many years, thought that this was the temple of Ceres, the goddess of planting and fertility, until they discovered an outdoor area where there were just hundreds of terracotta Athenas, that people apparently bought at souvenir stands and then did whatever they did. Generally speaking, the public did not go into these temples. There are altar spaces, there are sacred spaces, but you and I, as commoners, there would have been a space outdoors, an outdoor altar, for us to go and do whatever it was we needed to do there. Just the priests and the upper classes would have gone in. But this temple, this is actually the smallest of the 3, and it's pretty spectacular. The base, you notice the base is made out of large blocks. The bases are actually older than the pillars and the rest of the temple. So this was actually a sacred site before the Greek colonists got there. And we'll see that. I've got some pictures of that clearly a little bit later on. But this is spectacular. The city, apparently all of these Greek cities, particularly in Sicily and what's now Italy, actually had these, they're called heroons or haroons. Sometimes there actually is the remains of a person in there. Oftentimes there is not. This is a monument to the hero of the city. Whoever the city is dedicated to. They think this city was probably dedicated to Hercules because on the temple frescoes there are the 12 labors and a lot of things about Hercules. This apparently never had anybody in it. At least there's nothing left that would indicate that. When the Romans took over this area, they buried this. They did not destroy it, which is interesting, but they buried it so that the old Greek hero was now gone. And so they could take over the city. But again, you can see the big blocks. Anytime you see those big blocks, that's Greek or pre-Greek. When you start seeing bricks and things, that's Roman. And so this is just an interesting feature of the town. This is also their what's called an ecclesiasteron, which is a meeting place for the Greeks. This is where they would have had their important town meetings, meetings of men, things like that. It was probably larger. It probably had wooden tiers at one point. And again, when the Romans took this over, they buried this. Fortunately for us, that preserved it. These areas were not discovered until 1952, 53, so they're actually in pretty good shape. The sad part is that in the 1800s, they built a road, having no idea. They knew the temples were there, but they had no idea where the city was. They built it right through the middle of the city. So they did destroy parts of these things. And then over the eons of time, farmers had carried off some of the cut bricks and things like that. But this gives you a kind of a good idea of what the site looks like. And again, if you know what you're looking at, it's really pretty neat. And again, the museum was helpful. This is the entrance to the Roman amphitheater. They built their own. They didn't want the ecclesiastron, so they built this instead. Again, they built it on top of an existing structure. The Romans didn't use that big block stuff. And again, you can see much more elaborate stonework and then a concrete arch. You know, the Romans invented concrete, so they could do lots of neat stuff. And this was not huge like the Colosseum in Rome or even the Colosseum in Pompeii. It was enough to sit maybe 1,500 people, have some sort of gladiatorial events or whatever, and in relative comfort. So it's interesting. This is the interior of what they call the Temple of Neptune. They're really not sure if it was for Neptune or not. And some of the modern interpretation is it might have been to Apollo. There's also some thought that there were two different variations of a temple to Hera. But this is very typical of the architecture that you would see. You've got this long central aisle here, and then you've got the two side aisles. And if that looks familiar, it's because it is. All of the early Christian temples are exactly the same way because they built on the exact same sites. All they would do is brick in the places between the pillars, and then you had the interior of your church. And I'll show you, I've got an illustration of that for you. But these big blocks predate the temple. So this was a sacred site before the Greeks arrived. It was a sacred site for them. The Romans maintained it as a sacred site, and oftentimes there are Christian sacred sites on the same places. So sacred sites have an interesting history in and of themselves.
But isn't the style of the pillars Egyptian?
These are Doric.
But they're kind of like the are in Egypt.
Similar. There's a limit to how much you can do with pillars, but keep in mind that the Greeks also did some colonization in Egypt. Okay, but these are Doric, so these are the older style.
They look like the Egypt.
Okay, and these are this temple is this temple I think is the oldest, it's 600 BC, and the other two are 500 BC, which are old. Please.
Is that the remains of a second story?
It's the remains. There would have been a roof over it, and those are the supports to the roof. The roof probably was made of wood, and would have probably been painted and stylized. But yeah, the smaller pillars on top. Now somebody had to climb up there and put those up there. And keep in mind, so the engineering that went into these things is phenomenal. And they're tall. I mean, you're talking. These pillars are 25 feet tall. Okay, so somebody's up there 35, 40 feet with very heavy stone, and so there had to be a crane system of some sort, a lifting system of some sort, and just these blocks. When you look at over here to the right, the blocks that are standing on top of those pillars, those are big. Those are thousands of pounds. Okay, so it's an amazing thing. This again, the Christian cathedrals, there would have been frescoes in all these spots. This is an unbelievably well-preserved temple. Probably is the best preserved Greek temple in the world. And you can see how the Greeks built their pillars. You see all the sections. Some of them have aged differently, and some of them are made out of slightly different stone than the others. It's all local stone. This is not marble. It's all the local stone here. But it's just absolutely incredible. Again, taking a look at this, note the pillars. This is, again, the Temple of Neptune. Just to give you an idea, this is the Cathedral of Syracuse. And if you look very closely, you can see all the Greek pillars in the wall. They just bricked them in to build the new sacred site when a new faith came in. So it's just interesting how that happened. This is absolutely enormous. This is a huge temple. The interior is unbelievable. You're looking at the altar area inside that raised platform. But it's just a massive, massive structure. To give you an idea, again, this is the more ancient temple. This is actually not even close to real size. I mean, these pillars are probably the size of this screen. They are massive. And give you an idea, that's my nephew. He's exactly 6 feet tall. Give you an idea of just how huge this thing is, and in incredible shape. This has survived earthquakes. It's survived. This was actually a Marine camp during World War II, which was also fortunate. This area, they are very grateful to the American Army in a lot of sites around Europe, not just in Italy. Once this was taken from the fascists and then the Germans were pushed out, the Americans actually made a camp here. Of course, the temples were there. But every American army also carried with it archaeologists and preservationists. And some of the better ones actually ended up here. There's actually a room in the museum dedicated to the American guys that sort of started some of the archaeology here and also some of the restoration work here. And so it's got a great story. But these things are just unbelievably just massive and in incredibly good position. Or condition. That's what it looks like from a little bit of a distance. All of this white in front, a lot of it is flowers. That's not snow. It is flowers. But you can see all kinds of buildings, what's the remnants of buildings all over the place. This is a fairly large town, probably 5,000 or 6,000 people that flourished for quite a while. And then the early Middle Ages, it was abandoned for any number of reasons, perhaps. These are the two temples standing next to each other. The temple of Hera, the one to the right in the distance, and then they think either Neptune or Apollo. There's some debate, but it's just absolutely magnificent, absolutely magnificent. You all know I like birds. This is a European robin, and it followed us all over the place. So it was kind of fun. So brought her home. Okay. Inside the museum was one of the most fascinating displays. About 3 miles or 4 miles from Paestum, they discovered another satellite town, and then they discovered the cemetery. And this was all in the 1950s or so. And when they started excavating the cemetery, there were very, very particular types of sarcophagi that were sort of house-shaped. They were long, about 6 feet or so, and as they began opening them, they had these phenomenal paintings inside. And most of them had to do with warfare scenes, nature scenery. This one is known as the Diver. It is unbelievably unique in this case. And you can see you have this man jumping off this platform into water, trees all over the place. The modern interpretation is that he's diving literally from life into death. And around the sides of this sarcophagus are the scenes of a banquet. But again, when you take a look at the detail of this, you can see individual hairs, you can see his eyes in the right position. It's just phenomenal, the artwork. And this is one of the side panels of his sarcophagus. These guys to the left are actually playing a game that apparently they played at these type of formal dinners. The guy sort of in the red there in the middle is actually, they finished their wine in their cups and there's just that little bit left. And what he's trying to do is throw drops of wine over this guy's head and hit his cup. And so apparently that's what he did at a Greek banquet. And so it's interesting, but the 4 panels are like this. And this is sort of the logo of the museum now and the feature. But the museum was absolutely fascinating. The whole site was just magnificent. And that, in turn, led us to the Amalfi Coast. We went to Salerno, which is this town here, not very far away from Paestum. And then again, I was glad my nephew was driving because the road it's an old goat trail, and in many places it's a little bit better than going out west where they don't believe in walls or retaining walls at all. But the retaining wall often was about this tall. So my niece and I are sitting there going, "Wow, look at that!" No. So it was kind of fun. There's the road over to the right, just to give you an idea, and about probably 300 feet straight down. But the Amalfi Coast is spectacular. It goes from Salerno to Sorrento. I don't know how many miles it was. You're not going to go fast anyway. But it's just absolutely stunning. All of these cliffs and all that. And then there are towns that are just built right up the sides of these cliffs. Including Amalfi is one of the towns, but there are a whole bunch of them. But it's rugged, it's beautiful. This is the Cathedral of St. Andrew at Amalfi, and you can see the Byzantine influence here. There are some of the relics of St. Andrew here. Supposedly, a number of the apostles came through Amalfi, according to their own tradition. But this was just, you can see we're there sort of in the evening, the famous clock tower. There was a mass going on, so, you know, and it was in the middle of mass, so they weren't letting us in. But it's just an absolutely beautiful town. We found this to be rather interesting. This is called the Fountain of the Apostles. And again, supposedly Peter came through here, Paul came through here, Andrew, Matthew, and James. And so this is sort of dedicated to all of them. But I found right next to my nephew, I sort of found that to be an interesting symbol of the apostles, a naked woman with water shooting out of her breast. Okay? I've never seen that in a church that I've gone to before, but it was really kind of interesting. And again, very interesting plaza, lots of really good restaurants and food and stuff. And the only reason that this is open, this is really tourist stuff. Generally, their season is March to October. But it was Saint Somebody's Day, and I have no idea what Saint's Day, so everything was open. A lot of people had the day off, and so there were little festivals going around in a lot of these towns. So it was just a piece of good luck that we found a lot of these things open. This is the Amalfi Coast. It's absolutely gorgeous. Again, take your time if you drive. We have to be going the right way, so we were on the inside of all these curves. Being on the outside might have been a little more interesting.
But it's two-way.
Yes, it's two-way, and they're trucks. It's really kind of, and there's no pull-offs. And how some of these people get to their houses, I have no idea. And because you can see the houses go all the way down to the sea, they're up, sometimes you have houses 200, 300 feet up the cliffs. Okay, it's intriguing, but absolutely beautiful. We did have a good time in Sorrento. There was a festival going on there. Ate in an excellent restaurant. We were the only people there, so the owner was very friendly and fed us all sorts. I don't think we ordered this. So don't worry about it. Just try it. So it was really fun. Then we decided to go down to Sicily to see more Greek ruins, and also just for fun to go to Syracuse, Sicily, where we stayed. Syracuse, beautiful town. This is the main plaza. When we walked into the plaza, we were kind of walking around, looking at the plaza, and there was this guy playing the accordion over where my nephew and niece are over here, sitting here. And there's accordion music going on. I'm sitting there, wait a minute, I know that song. He was playing, for those of you that remember, he's playing the old Procol Harum song, Whiter Shade of Pale, on the accordion. And it sounded really good. And so it was just really funny. And then later on, he was playing disco stuff. He was really kind of an interesting character. But this is the Cathedral of St. Lucy. She is the patron saint of Syracuse in Sicily. And again, that's where those pillars were. This was at one time a Greek city. And of course, it was the home of Archimedes. And this is on the island. Probably for us, I laugh a lot anyway. But as we're walking through the cathedral, there's this little side chapel. This is a chapel to Our Lady of the Snow. So I'm quite sure it was meant for us in our Syracuse. But it was really kind of a nice little. It's really the marble on the floor is unbelievable. It's just a beautiful cathedral. And again, you can see the ancient Greek pillars that they simply built around. Sometime they think in the 5th or 6th century when Christianity was brought into this community. And again, there was an excellent underground museum that we sort of discovered by accident. One of the guides in the cathedral asked us if we'd been to the museum across the street. It was like, well, we didn't know there was a museum across the street, but it was all underground. They found about 20 years ago when they were doing a sewer project, they found all of this ancient material underneath all of this other ancient material. So the original parts of the original Greek city were down there. It was really something, and a very early monastery as well. So it's if you happen to go to Sicily, make sure you go just across the street. Very different than Naples. Much cleaner, much brighter. Oops, sorry. Okay, but one of the interesting things, all of these were little shops. They don't open up really until it's about 7 o'clock at night. Shops are open during the day. But they were exactly like they were in Pompeii and Herculaneum. They were very narrow in the front, went to the back. People who owned them live up top, and oftentimes the 3rd floor is rented, in this case, oftentimes for tourists. Very, very clean, interesting. There are cats everywhere, absolutely everywhere, and they don't seem to be owned. This one was unusual. This was actually in somebody's apartment. They're all over the streets, and they are well groomed, well fed. When you walk through the streets at night, people start putting out food and water for the cats. And according to the tradition, at some point in Sicily's history, and the same was true on Malta, by the way, the cats saved them from starvation. So this is your payment back. So you take care of all these cats, and they're literally, and they look fine. They're not mangy, they're not flea-bitten or anything. They absolutely ignore you. But it was incredible. This one, like I said, a little different. This actually was owned by somebody, but it was really an interesting tradition. Just outside of Syracuse is another archaeological park. This one nowhere near as restored, and obviously doesn't have as much money. This is the largest Greek amphitheater known in the world today. And they still do plays there. They've done some modernization every now and here and there. And you can see the underground, here you can really see the underground rooms where they would have moved scenery and things like that back and forth. But this is absolutely enormous. And you can see way up here in the left corner, you can see a couple people sitting up there. Just to give you an idea of the size, probably 2,200 to 2,500 people. And they think in this one as well, there probably were wooden tiers that went up higher than this one. And so it's really spectacular. Right next to it is an old quarry. That was, by the way, cut right out of the rock. That was not built, that was simply cut right in the side of the hill. This was a fault in the quarry. It's a cave called the Ear of Dionysus. Dionysus was an evil king who imprisoned all kinds of people, and then he threw them in this cave because it's acoustically unbelievable. You can stand at the front of the cave, it's 300 feet deep, and talk about this loud. And you can hear it clearly all the way in the back. So Dionysus threw his prisoners in here and then cut a hole in the top so he could hear what they were saying. And therefore, stop any plots before they got any further. And eventually he missed one because they killed him. Okay, so but this is called Dionysus's Ear. And it's just an interesting part of this park that has all sorts of neat stuff in it. This is an old Roman Colosseum. And again, you can see that this has not been declared a UNESCO site, so it doesn't have a lot of money pouring into it. But it's really interesting to give you an idea of what ruins really look like before any restoration takes place. There actually are names. You couldn't go down to the floor, but you could actually walk around most of this. But you actually can see some of the names of people who bought seats. Okay, are still there. And this one could be flooded, so they could have sea battles in this one. It was kind of interesting. You see the well right there in the center, okay, and that allowed them to flood it when they dammed it up, and then they could unleash it too. And I think in about a half an hour, okay, they could change it over from a water to a land issue. But it's interesting. A lot of the stones were taken away by Charles V to build a fort on the edge of town. So this one was really damaged, but they're doing the best they can with this site. It's a big park. It's just this great big park. This is supposed to be the burial site of Archimedes. Of course, he's the hero of the town. Stood off the Romans for as long as they could. Of course, when the Romans took over the town, the first person they went to kill was Archimedes. This is a very typical Roman niche burial area. Whether it was actually Archimedes' tomb or not, who knows? There are dozens of these throughout, and then hundreds of niches carved into the rock all over the place, where icons of some sort would have been put.
Is that soft stone? What is that?
Not particularly. It's a type of limestone, but it's actually fairly hard. It's again, it endures. So but this was very typical of what the Romans do. They would carve these little tombs into the side of the rock, and then there are niches inside that whatever was put in there was put in there. But this is by tradition Archimedes' burial spot. They all in that same park. Inside, when you go up to the town, they've got several places where they've uncovered various Greek ruins. This is the Temple of Apollo. It was an interesting place at night. It was kind of fun. There were cats all over it, but it was interesting, right in the middle of town. And supposedly, it is good luck to kiss in front of the Temple of Apollo. I couldn't get any takers, and my nephew offered to give me a peck on the cheek. It's like, no, that's all right. And he's a little big for that now, but in fact, they did. Now here, what I really want to show you is you can see the Greek, the big blocks. Those are the Greek. There was a 5th century cathedral put right over that, and that's what the smaller bricks are. And then that Gothic arch was added even later. And so again, building over a sacred site and continuing to build over it. This is Mount Etna. We actually went up the wrong side. You're supposed to go up the south. We didn't know that, so we went driving up the north on this road about as wide as our aisle there in the center. But we did see spectacular stuff. This is all lava flows. All this gray and it's all over the place. There's been a fairly constant eruptions going on forever. Some of these are as recent as 2011, when they had a fairly major lava flow. And we're up at about the 5,000 foot level here. When we got up to about 7,000 foot, we hit snow, and quite a bit of it. It was not really a very good day up there. It was very foggy, as you can see. It was the top of the mountain was put in all in clouds. It cost about €100 to go up at the top, the very top. It had been a nice clear day. I might have done that just because I probably will never go back, but it wasn't. So we saved €100. But we did get up into the snow. The snow is about 10 feet deep. It was an interesting day. Again, you can see, they're all plastered, full of, well, it's about 58 degrees actually. Okay? But we couldn't climb up to the top. So we did climb one of the side cones called Mount Sylvester, which is still a volcanic cone. It's a side vent. Still active at times. It hasn't been in a while. But this lava flow is actually from 2011, okay, out of this little side vent. So it was really kind of a neat experience. This is looking toward the top, and you can actually see, if you look very closely, you can see a little steam at the top. The mountain was smoking at the top. And about 10 days later, you might have remembered seeing on the news a whole bunch of people at the top running away from an explosion. That was about 10 days after we were there. It was steaming, but it was really, and that's all lava. Everything you see there, that's a side cone right in the center of the picture. It was all lava flow. This is this is out of place. I'm sorry. This is along the Malta coast. This should be about 7 sides. This was Taormina, which was it was to the north. It's about halfway between Mount Etna and Messina on the Sicilian east coast. Absolutely beautiful town. This was the town plaza. There again, churches all over the place. This is the original town watchtower. You can see what they've done with their plaza. The ground in the plaza was all paved. Beautiful place. And you can see the cliffs, however. I mean, we're up about 400 feet here, and the town is all up and down the cliff. Okay? It's just spectacular. We found out that the skull and crossbones, something we generally don't see at the entrances to our churches and places of worship today, that basically means there are burials in there. So when you walk into some of these cathedrals or some of these churches, there are burials in the floor. A lot of times they're bishops or priests or monsignors, cardinals occasionally. So, it's not that it's a pirate sanctuary, which is, one of the kids running around was talking about pirates and stuff. They have one of the best preserved Greek amphitheaters in the world. And it is still used. You can see the modern seats up at the top. Look at where it is. This is just unbelievable. It's spectacular. I'm not sure I'd ever watch a play. Just looking around was just absolutely incredible. Again, looking through the view, again, you see what the Romans did. The Romans are brick. Okay? The Greeks are all the big blocks. Okay? And so this was an enormous place. But again, give you an idea of the town outside. And this was actually looking from the theater out on the Sicilian Straits. Messina would be up to our north. Just absolutely spectacular. Little humble house here and there. But this is the town. I mean, this is cliffs. And then there was actually a cable car that took you down to the other part of town, about 200 feet lower. I'm not even sure how you got to some of these houses. But it was just an absolutely beautiful place. It's an absolutely beautiful place. And give you an idea. Mount Etna did clear up for us toward evening. You can see that's all Mount Etna smoke up there. Those actually aren't clouds. And so we did at least get a little bit of a show. And just to prove that I actually did see Mount Etna in the clear. We were there. But it was interesting. The old city of Syracuse was very nice at night, very safe. Restaurants don't open until 7:30, and they don't expect anybody until 9:30. So when we showed up at 7:30, absolutely starved, we had mostly to ourselves, which was kind of fun, because then you get pampered and you get to talk to the people and all that. It was a lot of fun. But beautiful city. You see, unlike Naples, it's actually lit at night, very clean. Again, just cats everywhere. But it was a lot of fun. This is the main fountain in the main square. We were looking at this at night, and everybody's saying, "Oh, you got to go to the cathedral square at night." Like, okay, so we went to the cathedral square at night, and it was pretty spectacular. It's absolutely gorgeous, nicely lit up. People are very proud of their cathedral, their town. There's a huge ritual at the festival, St. Lucy. They bring out the statue and all that sort of stuff. St. Lucy's kind of strange. St. Lucy was one of the early female saints. that was killed by having her throat cut. So the statue has this big knife sticking in her throat. So it's like, okay, that's kind of bizarre, but interesting. We did catch a market. I never realized my nephew is a flea market person. And so we did go to the market. It was really a lot of fun. It was the regular town market, all kinds of junk stuff too. But then a lot of food. I maybe wish I had a kitchen in the place that we were staying. We didn't. But the seafood market was hysterical, and they take the heads, okay, and they put them out, and that's the sign that this is fresh caught that day. So this is an enormous swordfish steak that he has here. This was actually a tuna steak down here, massive. This had to be a 500-pound tuna. It was just this massive piece of fish. And this fellow was fun. He was singing. They're all talking to each other, and there are cats everywhere. On market day, and then nobody cared. They throw them sardines, throw them food and stuff like that. It was really kind of fun. It was a good place to be. We did drive around a little bit. This is Ragusa, which is one of the towns a little bit further south and inland a little bit. Again, you can see that they built just absolutely on the side of the cliff. And there are houses going all the way down. The center part of town is really neat, where the old cathedral was, and the old part of town. Again, all these interesting windy streets, good restaurants, needless to say. These little things here is Arancini. Some of you might be, please, question.
My previous picture, what was that big yellow structure at the top?
That's part of an old civic building of some sort. The cathedral is actually behind that. You can't see the cathedral from there. But it's, and it had one time also been a Jesuit seminary. So this was a kind of interesting town. Yeah, much newer than some of the other parts of town. But this was Arancini, sort of a local delicacy there. It's a street food. It's made of rice. It's not hard to make, but it's kind of a pain in the neck to make because rice doesn't stick together really well. So you cook rice until it's almost done, mash it all together, and then inside is always mozzarella cheese and then whatever else you want to put in there. We had some, this had sort of a ground meat, tomato sauce ragu. We had one that actually had like chicken Alfredo in the middle of it. It was really good and easy to make. On the east side of the island, they make them pointed like this. On the west side, they're round. Okay, so the Sicilians have different. Again, the pizza was great. This pizza had like sardines and all kinds of great stuff on it. It was a lot of fun. A good place to be. And then we did go to Malta to see even more temples. This was a temple tour. We liked it. But Malta was not really on my list ever of places to go. I knew it was there. But in reading about Malta and then being there, Malta has a fascinating history and full of nice people. They speak English on Malta too, which is nice. They also speak Maltese, which is a unique language to Malta. It sounds, if you just are sort of listening to it, it sounds like Italian being spoken with an Arabic cadence. But in fact, it's not related to Italian or Arabic at all. They think that it's a descendant language actually from Carthaginian, from Phoenician. And so it has its own uniqueness, but it definitely has that cadence of an Arabic language. It was really interesting. And of course, they were a British colony until the 60s, and British owned them for almost 200 years. So most people speak relatively good English. And of course, there is also an English upper class that's still there, and that definitely speak English. We are staying in Sliema, which is across from the capital, Valletta. You can see the dome there from the cathedral. It was a nice, beautiful little apartment that we stayed in. This was costing us €70 a night. It was very, very inexpensive. It was a nice place to stay. We had a private garage underneath, very well located. Malta is about the size of Oneida Lake. It's literally about 22, 23 miles long and about 8 miles wide. There's a secondary island called Gozo, which is a 10-minute ferry ride across the way. It's really a very compact place. Most of the people live in sort of the northeast quadrant. There are about 500,000 people that live there. And the rest of it is really sort of country. And it's very rugged country, but it's really attractive. There are 4 UNESCO sites on Malta. These are some of the oldest religious structures still standing in the world today. They predate the pyramids by over 1,000 years. They predate Stonehenge by over 1,000 years. These are incredible sites. This is one of them, the Tarshian temples. What UNESCO has come in and done is build it looks like canvas, but it's actually a very specialized material. They've actually built sort of like a tent over these sites. And the real damage was not, well, here would be wind, weather, and all, it was actually sun that was damaging these sites, as well as they have what they call the Sirocco rains, which are very, very heavy downpours in March and April usually. But the sun was damaging these, so they built these interesting sort of tents over them. The carvings are unbelievable. These are 5,000 years old. And we have absolutely no idea what happened in these places. There is not a lot of evidence of sacrifice, certainly no human sacrifice, but the very intricate carvings that are found all over the place, nobody has any idea what they mean, but they're there, and particularly in this temple. This temple is actually one of the newest ones. This one is like 4,500 years old, as opposed to 5,000. But the artwork is spectacular. And again, cats all over the place, and they don't shoo them away. Cats can go wherever they want to go, and pretty well fed. But this actually what I wanted you to see is the layout above the cat. You see that sort of semicircular layout? It actually is on both sides. Almost all these temples have either 3 or 5 curved rooms that all come off a central hallway. But they're also designed very carefully so that if you are sitting in one room, you cannot see into the one across from you. The doors are off center. And if you're even at the one at the top, you cannot see what's happening anywhere else. And they built these structures, and then they built very, very large earthworks around them to insulate them. We have absolutely no idea what happened in these places, but they are obviously important. And here you can see, this is a very elaborate temple structure. This one was actually built over several hundred years. But again, you can see the door off here to the right. It's designed, and it is actually a movable door, but it's designed so that whatever happens in here is absolutely secret. That's the only place it happens. You can't see it from anywhere else. And it's just absolutely intriguing. There are all sorts of these interesting, very large sculptures. This one actually had the rest of it been there, would have been over 6 feet tall, of very, very large people. Absolutely no idea what they mean. Some of them, however, are designed, the body is complete. They're all wearing sort of this interesting, almost looks like a dress of some sort. Some of them actually have a hole where the neck would be, and they've found a variety of sculpted heads with extended necks that apparently you could change the heads on some of these, for whatever reason. We have absolutely no idea what they meant or who these people are supposed to be. This is a reconstruction based on a variety of ruined sites. This is what they think they look like. It's unclear whether it's a real person. It's unclear whether it's male or female. No idea. So it's really interesting, but it's who knows? Sacred person or royalty of some sort, unknown. There are a number of Venuses, they call them. They're loosely called Venuses. Some of them are very evidently female. Many of them are not. This is one of the ones. This is one of the oldest ones, actually. And the instinct to say, okay, it's female, until you saw this is actually the picture they showed you a picture of a sumo wrestler right next to it. This could be male. Again, not all of them can be, but some of them can. And for whatever reason, these very large, obese figures were very important to these people because they show up in their artwork and in their sculptures. This piece here was actually about the size of a tennis ball, so it wasn't large. But then the large ones were huge. So it's interesting. One of the sites that we did also see was a place called Gare de l'Homme. It's a cave. And all of Malta's natural history has washed into this cave at some sort. It's about 300 feet back. There's a very peculiar type of woodlouse that lives in there. It's unique to the world. So you're only allowed to go back so far, and then because they don't want you stepping on these things. But for literally tens of thousands of years, things washed into this cave. And they have found unbelievable stuff, all kinds of Ice Age stuff, a lot of pre-Ice Age stuff. And at one time, Malta was part of dry land going from Italy all the way to Tunis in North Africa. And as the oceans rose at the end of the Ice Age, it got more and more isolated. And as it got more and more isolated, the animals got smaller and smaller. So there's very unique miniature elephants, miniature hippopotamuses on Malta. And the skeletons are found in this cave, along with things like wolves, bear, things like that. By the time humans began settling Malta, it was pretty much down to rabbits and hedgehogs. That's about all time birds. But it was just a fascinating place in this one cave. This is another temple area called Hagar Kim, but this shows a very distinctive decorative style. Someone actually made all those holes. And why is anybody's guess. But this is very typical of the entrance to these particular caves, to these particular sacred sites. They're not particularly small. You know, I had to bend over to get in them. But if you were 5'5", Joe had no problem. She walked right in. And again, these curved rooms would have been coming off the sides of the central staircase. This is kind of a model of what some of these look like. This one has two side-by-side temples. And again, the doors would have been structured so that you couldn't look from one side into the other. Again, no evidence of human sacrifice. Very little sketchy evidence that there might have at some point been some animal sacrifice, but not universally. It doesn't show up in all of these. They all have an altar area. Okay, so I'll show you one in a second. But you can sort of see in the back, no idea what happened to the altar area. Okay, they're definitely not seats. This is the sort of that curtain, that covering that goes over them. But what I really want you to see here are these holes. They're huge holes all over the place. So of course I asked, so where are the holes? They're hinges. They apparently had massive wooden doors on these, and they hinged them with rope through these holes. These are actually looped. And then they also had locks, so that there's another set of holes a little further back. So somebody obviously had to be closed in. They could close the door, and then they would put a log of some sort, put it in one hole, and then through the other one, so the doors could not be opened. Okay, so apparently it was important to lock this place up as well. Just absolutely fascinating. This stone weighs over 20 tons. And it was moved somewhere, they think, up to a mile. By whom and how? Good guess. No idea. And why? And you notice it's not on the ground. So it had to be picked up and put on this pedestal. Why? Good guess. It's just, but absolutely massive. And there are obelisks in a lot of these temples also. Same thing, huge stones. Why? Who knows? And there's no evidence that there were particularly huge settlements. So this must have been some sort of group activity to move these things. And there are a lot of temples over the sites. This is really what Malta looks like outside of the city area. A lot of small farms. They grow a lot of what we would consider garden crops. Tomatoes, peas, things like that. There's no room to grow wheat. So Malta needs to have its food imported. And during World War II, that was a disaster. Malta was bombed virtually every day between 1939 and 1942, trying to keep the British out of there. Why the Italians didn't invade it is anybody's guess. But their military museum is spectacular. But it was just a horrific time for anybody living on Malta at that point. But this is what the Malta landscape looks like. And it's not farm-friendly soil at all. And yet this is what they carved those temples out of. The rock was carved out of this sort of stuff and then transported into these magnificent temples. Prickly pear cactus grows everywhere. It's like the national plant. And this guy at least made a fence out of it. This one happens to be in bloom. And some of them are 9, 10, 12 feet tall. They're incredible. And they also grow all over Sicily. The Maltese have just started to get into orchards and vineyards. They do make wines. It's a fairly new thing. They've imported grapes from Sicily for the most part. But they're just starting to get into orchards. In Sicily, you see orange and lemon orchards everywhere. They're just starting to do that in Malta now. This is Malta's Blue Grotto. It actually goes back in there several hundred feet. We didn't take the boat tour in there, but it was kind of fun to be on top this way. Beautiful, beautiful area. This is the Mediterranean, of course, and interesting. St. Paul may have been shipwrecked on Malta. Nobody knows where his shipwreck was when he was on his way to Rome. The Maltese have done that. It's certainly within the realm of possibility. There's no question early Christians were there. There are catacombs all over the island, and especially under this city, this Medina. okay, and or Rabat, I'm sorry. But St. Paul supposedly preached from this very site. It's on a small hill. There's a big cathedral behind it, but underneath are literally miles of catacombs, okay, that were used not only for early Christian burials, but during the bombings. That's where the people lived. Okay, they would go down at night, come back in the day, clean up town, and then try to get on with their lives. It's just, again, fascinating place. Really, really good bakeries in Rabat. Really good bakeries. What they can do with figs in Malta is just absolutely incredible. There are not very many stop signs, so they're rather friendly. So it was kind of fun. Just see something different. This is actually on the island of Gozo, which is next to Malta. This is the oldest still standing human-made religious structure on Earth. This is over 5,000 years old. And again, look at the size of the stone that they moved in to make this. It's absolutely spectacular. Same basic design, the same that sort of trefoil design on this. You can see that UNESCO has helped. They are propping some of this up. But this has stood from earthquakes and all sorts of things. And you see, if you look very closely, it looks like just a jumble of stones until you really look closely. These stones are very carefully set. There's no mortar in this whatsoever. These stones are very carefully set in there so that it's like a keystone, so that everything, all the weight is against every other stone and spread out, which has made this incredibly stable for over 5,000 years. It's a real feat of engineering here in Malta. Okay, just absolutely magnificent. The floors are not smooth rock. As if they look, it's like, oh boy, they found smooth rock. They actually pounded the rock into powder and then rehydrated it and pounded it into pavement, just like this. So the floors are absolutely level. You can stick a level on them today, okay, and the bubble will be right in the middle. Okay? And so they re-engineered the floors of all of these temples. It's just spectacular, okay? Just absolutely spectacular. Matt is standing at what they think is the oldest purposely designated religious site, human-made, on Earth. Absolutely no idea what happened there, but that is definitely an altar site of some sort, and it is somewhere over 5,000 years old. And that's what it looks like a little closer up. Again, it's got these, the small obelisks. A lot of those carved holes have weathered off in this case, but it's just, it obviously had meaning, but we have no idea what. And the temple builders disappeared. They disappeared, and there was a long period of time when no one lived on Malta. Probably sailors stopped there before the next group came and settled. So this is totally lost to history. We have absolutely no idea what any of this actually means. I did have to step into the Mediterranean, shoes and all. It was cold, but I've been to the Pacific and the Mediterranean in 1 year. I only have a few more oceans to go, but it really was fun. This beach was supposed to be the beach that Odysseus was shipwrecked on and then held captive in this cave by Calypso for 7 years. You used to be able to go down the cave. They no longer let you do that. But if you lean over, you can kind of poke your head in there. If somebody hangs on your ankles, it's a good idea. But that's the cave where Calypso held Odysseus for 7 of his 10 years wandering around the Mediterranean. This was the coast of Gozo. This is called Fungus Island because a very unique fungus grows there. And when the Knights of St. John took it over in the 1500s, the first thing they did is made it illegal for anybody else to go on the island because they thought the fungus had some sort of curative qualities. They had no idea what it cured, but it was important. Apparently the natives never went on the island because it was full of fungus. Okay, and there it sits. It still has this very unique fungus on it. Nobody really knows if it cures anything, but it's an interesting spot. Those cliffs are a good 100 or more feet high. You can see some people standing here on the way. This is the famous Azure Arch, which no longer exists. About 2 weeks after we were there, it collapsed. It was a huge storm. You can see why, if you look at this picture. You can see how it is actually balanced on a very small platform. But if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, they have filmed there. You might remember the movie 300. They actually filmed here as well, and all that. And literally 2 weeks later, this was in the ocean. It's a real shame. It's one of the main sites of Malta for years, centuries, and it exists no more. A friend of mine wanted me to take pictures in phone booths, so there we are. They have the little red phone booths. I didn't find any blue ones that transported me into, other lands or anything like that. So you can tell who watches, Doctor Who. And, but it was kind of interesting. And again, this is the city of Victoria, which is a huge fort, very interesting place to go. But give you an idea of what Malta looks like. All of the buildings are this whitish yellow, because that's what the color of the rock is. Okay, so what the Maltese have done is when they get an opportunity to do something with a different color, they do. And so a lot of the balconies and porches are painted in absolutely wild colors against this kind of yellow-white brick that's just absolutely everywhere. This is the hero of Malta, Jean de Valette. He and about 700 Knights of Malta with about 9,000 Maltese held off 35,000 Turks for 4 months in 1565 and defeated the Turkish army and saved Malta from just absolute devastation. The Turks had come to absolutely destroy the place, and they held off. Of course, the Turks also destroyed everything on Malta. So Valette redesigned the city. He was 71 years old at the time. The city is now named in his honor. The capital city is Valletta, and it does date, everything dates from 1566. There's a little bag here with a map on it. So he is the hero. Nobody was guarding anything on Malta. But they did have these neat little guard towers around, and so that was kind of fun. And they were having this interesting dance contest right in the main square. They're all from Italy, somewhere. They weren't very good, but boy, were they having a lot of fun. And so we watched for a while. And these were not kids, by the way. These were like all the way up probably to our age and all the way down to like 4 and 5 years old. And they were just having the time of their life. They're doing these strange dances that had varieties of music, but it was a lot of fun. And it was neat. We did get ourselves into the middle of a protest. It was Sunday afternoon in Valletta. We had wanted to go to one of the museums, and the guard said, no, museum's closed. It's like, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're supposed to be open till 5. Oh, big protest going on today. Well, they were protesting the prime minister apparently is a socialist. It's a woman, and she is being accused of having offshore assets. And she's also started all these social programs. The protesters were like us. These were not kids. They apparently voted for the socialists. They were. I don't think I saw a single protester under 50. So I mean, this is huge. There were thousands. Like all of Malta was here. There were thousands of people. Bands playing on it. That's the Maltese flag. So it was kind of interesting to chat with people and ask them what was up. And they were more than happy to talk to us and try to convince us that we should vote. It's like, well, we don't live here, but that's okay. I'll vote. Sorry. But it was just interesting to hear. We're not the only people that have political issues. Everybody does. And this is, town. Took ferries everywhere. It's easier. But you can see what the people do to try to give a little color in their lives. And it's kind of neat. There was one interesting place. There's an arts and crafts village that was really fun. It's the old British military base. And what one of the entrepreneurs did in the 70s, met him, a great guy. It was a lot of fun. In the front part are the stores, and in the back part, they're actually making the stuff. A lot of jewelry is being made there. They do a lot of filigree work in gold and silver. They do a lot of glass work in Malta. They do a lot of ceramic work there. And you can go watch them. You can wander back into their shops and then go out and buy stuff or not, or just enjoy it. But they've changed this entire base into this arts and crafts village. It was really neat. If you get a chance to go to Malta, make sure you go there. It was fascinating to stay. And then very quickly, we did go back to Germany. This is my nephew and niece's apartment. They're up on the 3rd floor with the dogs and all that. And it's this is kind of cool because I usually cook when I'm there because I cook a lot better than they do. But Matthew wanted to cook one day, so he's actually not a bad cook either. And so it was kind of fun. But they have a nice place. We decided to go to Mainz, Matt and I, for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted to see the Red Baron's grave. And this is Manfred von Richthofen and his family. There's a little picture of the Red Baron there. So I've got to see the Red Baron's grave. Just something to do. But the Gutenberg Museum in Mainz is spectacular. Gutenberg invented the printing press in Mainz in 1450. His family was from Mainz. This is a replica of his press. It's a working replica. But the museum itself is dedicated to printing. It was like €5. It was spectacular. 3 floors of stuff all the way back to the most ancient printing on papyrus and everything else, all the way up to modern printing. It was just a spectacular place. And they gave an interesting demonstration of how this printing press worked. It was all in German, but it was still, you didn't need to know that much to see it. We did go out to Aachen and to Cologne. I had not been there. And we got out there and found out there was Fat Thursday. They don't do Fat Tuesday in Germany. They do Fat Thursday, because in their religious tradition, the week before Ash Wednesday, the only day you could eat meat was Thursday. You weren't allowed to eat it on the weekend, and then Monday and Tuesday, there were other meals that you were supposed to eat, so they do Fat Thursday. So they did allow us in. There was Mass going on, and I told the guys, look, I'm from the United States, and I'm probably not coming back, can I at least go in and see Charlemagne's tomb? And he was very generous and said, absolutely yes, but no pictures, please, of course. There was Mass going on, so I did not do that. But we did get to go see Charlemagne's burial place in Aachen. And we did go to Cologne, and of course, same issue, because there were tens of thousands of drunk Germans in Cologne at 9 o'clock in the morning, they closed the cathedral. But the cathedral is unbelievable. It's the 3rd largest cathedral in the world. For many years, it was the largest structure in the world. The towers are over 515 feet tall. It is just a massive structure. And again, I couldn't go in, so I don't have any pictures of the inside. Supposedly, the relics of, actually it's the skulls of the 3 magi are supposed to be in here. So it's a pilgrimage site and all that. So it's interesting. This is the Roman Museum, which is right across the street from the cathedral. And the Romans built a huge city where Cologne now is. This is one of the mosaic floors. And this was actually better preserved than any of the ones from Pompeii or Herculaneum. And the Roman Museum is spectacular. If you end up in Cologne sometime, make sure you go. And it was actually open for at least part of the day. So we got to see some of the material inside that. But the fun part was all literally tens of thousands of costumed drunk Germans celebrating Fat Thursday. Nothing particular going on. It's not like they go to church first. They just show up in costumes, drink a lot of beer, sing a lot, eat brats, and have a lot of fun. And we did too. My nephew is actually in there waving at you. You might see him way in the corner here. Hey, I have a picture of me waving too. I stand out a lot more. This white beard is like a beacon, especially when you're around all these young people. But they were just having a lot of fun. And it was fun to wander around and be part of the festival and all that. It was really enjoyable. The original lock bridge is in Cologne. These are people, and they got married. They put their names on the locks, and then you lock the lock on the bridge, and it's supposed to seal your marriage. They've actually, 3 times in the last 25 years, they've actually had to cut all these off because the bridge is not made for the weight. There are hundreds of thousands of locks. This is a big bridge, crossing the river, and it was really kind of neat, and so it was just something interesting. We did take the last day. We took a hike on the Rhine, and this place is called the Mouse House. And when it was built in the 1400s, it was a big joke because about 4 miles away is the Cat House of the Cat family, which is this big, massive castle. And the idea was that the cats would be able to go and beat up this castle anytime they wanted. So it got nicknamed the Mouse House. Well, when the French came through in 1689, there was one castle in the entire Moselle and Rhine Valley they could not get to, and it was the Mouse House. And it was the only one still standing that's not in ruins. It's now actually, you can rent rooms and there's like a hotel. And it's an interesting hike to get there. It sits right up on the side of, that's it. You see it right up on the side of the cliff above Sangor. And it was a great hike. It was a lot of fun. The first 200-300 feet up the side of the cliff were a little tough. But once you got up there, it was really, really gorgeous. And this is the Rhine Valley near the Lorelei, where the Rhine takes its big swings. It narrows down into the rapids there. And it's the town of St. Goar underneath us there. But it was just a really, really beautiful day. And this is Frankfurt at night. They live in Frankfurt. We went out because you had to have apple vine and things like that, which is fun. We just had a really, really good time. Nice, and I thank you all and you all for sharing this with me. It was a lot of fun, and thanks for being part of Oasis. We really appreciate it.